Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of champagne fountains, diamond tiaras, and marriages arranged with all the tender romance of a corporate merger. The Gilded Age wedding. Not the soft-focus period drama version with swelling violins and a handsome duke who secretly adores you. I mean the real thing, where love was optional, the corset was mandatory, and your entire future got decided by your mother, a lawyer, and a man you had met roughly twice. Before we begin, a heartfelt thank you to the listener who suggested tonight's topic. Your ideas shape what gets made here, and the channel would not be the same without people like you quietly sending in the requests that turn into these long, sleepy journeys. So take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you, because somehow it is always 2 a.m. somewhere. And if you would rather drift off without a screen glowing in your face, the channel is now on Spotify as well, linked down in the description. And if you'd like a little more, membership is already available on the channel, which gives you access to 8 hours of ad-free video to drift off to, uninterrupted whenever you like. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, get comfortable, and maybe loosen anything you're wearing that even remotely resembles a corset, because you're going to need to breathe for this one. Let us pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to be sold into high society with a smile on your face? Did brides actually love their husbands? Or was that just an unfortunate accident that occasionally happened? How many forks does one human being need at a single meal? Could you survive being laced into a garment so tight that fainting was considered a personality trait? Would you last one afternoon under the gaze of a woman whose entire job was deciding whether your family was rich enough to exist? And what happens when the fairy tale wedding ends? The guests go home, and you are left married to a stranger with a castle and no money. And now, congratulations, you have just woken up in 1883. You are young, you are wealthy, you are engaged to a man you cannot quite picture, and there are 4 servants standing outside your door waiting to dress you. Good luck. Let us start at the beginning, which for you means opening your eyes in a bedroom roughly the size of a modern parking garage. These ceilings are painted with cherubs who look faintly disappointed in you. The sheets are imported, the curtains are heavier than you are, and somewhere in this enormous house a small army of people is already awake, polishing things you will never touch. You're the daughter of new money, which in this world is both a blessing and a quiet insult. Your father made a fortune in railroads or steel or something equally loud, and now the family has one job left to finish, turning that money into respectability. And respectability, my friend, has a name. It is you. Let us examine your situation, because it is more precarious than the silk sheets suggest. You have never cooked a meal, drawn your own bath, or opened a door with your own hands. You are, by any practical measure, magnificently useless, and that is entirely by design. A useful daughter is a poor daughter. A daughter with visible skills has clearly been made to work, and work is what your family is spending a fortune to make everyone forget they ever did. So you've been raised like an orchid in a hothouse, delicate, decorative, and utterly dependent on the greenhouse staying warm. The morning light filters through windows taller than most people's homes, and you lie there in a bed you could get lost in, contemplating a future you had almost no part in choosing. Think of it as being a very expensive package that has already been addressed, stamped, and scheduled for delivery. You're simply the last one to be told where you're going. Your day has not started yet, not really. because nothing in your life starts until someone else decides it does. In a moment there will be a soft knock, and then the machinery of your morning will begin without asking your opinion. But for now, in this one quiet sliver of time, you are allowed to simply exist. Enjoy it. It is the last decision-free moment you will get for hours. It is worth understanding what all this wealth is actually for, because it is not for you. The mansion, the servants, the imported everything, none of it exists to make you happy. It exists to make you marriageable. Every French lesson, every dancing master, every agonizing hour spent learning which spoon does what, it was all an investment, and the return on that investment is a wedding to a man of higher rank. You're not a person so much as a portfolio, and today the market is very interested in your performance. Ever felt the particular dread of a job you did not apply for, on a career path you did not choose, with a boss who happens to be your mother? Multiply that by an inheritance and lace it into a corset, and you have the emotional weather of a Gilded Age heiress at dawn. The strange part is that everyone around you considers this the pinnacle of good fortune. You're rich, you're young, you're about to be married up the social ladder, and if you feel a faint, inexplicable sense of doom about all of it, well, that is simply not the sort of thing a lady mentions before breakfast. So you lie still, listening to the distant sounds of a household preparing to arrange your entire existence. The doom is real, but so are the diamonds. In this world, they usually come as a set. It is time to meet the true architect of your destiny, and no, it is not you. It is your mother. Somewhere down the hall she's already awake, sipping tea and reviewing correspondence like a general planning an invasion, which in a sense she is. Her entire life has narrowed to a single glittering objective, marrying you upward. She has memorized bloodlines, studied who is feuding with whom, and can identify a genuine European title at 40 paces. To her, your wedding is not a celebration. It is a campaign, a negotiation, and the crowning achievement of decades of social clawing. And you, whether you like it or not, are her masterpiece. Let us appreciate the sheer scale of her ambition, because it is genuinely staggering. This woman has spent years learning the unwritten rules of a society that was built specifically to keep people like her out. She knows which families arrived on which ships, whose grandfather was a butcher, and which duchesses quietly broke behind her jewels. She has absorbed all of this the way a scholar absorbs ancient languages, except her scholarship has exactly one purpose, and that purpose is walking down a staircase in about an hour wearing your face. Her weapon of choice is the calling card, that small rectangle of engraved cardboard that governs the entire social world. She knows precisely whose card must be left, in what order, and how long one must wait for a response before it becomes an insult. It is like a game of chess where the pieces are human egos and the board is the entire city, and your mother plays it at a level that would frighten actual generals. She loves you. It is important to say that, because it is true, and it also makes everything more complicated. In her mind, arranging this marriage is the single greatest act of love she can perform. She is securing your future, elevating your children, and cementing the family's place for generations. That the process treats you like livestock at a very glamorous auction is, to her, simply the cost of caring properly. Imagine the most intense project manager you've ever worked under, the one who colour codes everything and remembers a mistake you made 3 years ago. Now imagine that person gave birth to you and considers your marriage the deadline that will define her legacy. That is your mother, and she has not missed a deadline in her life. She's not about to start with the biggest one of all. Her days are a blur of activity you barely notice. interviews with dressmakers, negotiations with florists, delicate letters to society matrons whose approval she is quietly courting. She fields gossip like a soldier fields incoming fire, deflecting some rumours, deploying others. When a rival family announces a grand engagement, she absorbs the blow, recalculates, and adjusts her own plans accordingly. Nothing rattles her for long. She's been preparing for this war since before you could walk, and here is the quiet, uncomfortable truth. Without her, you would be nothing in this world. Her ferocity is the only thing standing between your family and the vast indifferent shrug of high society. Every door that opens for you was pried open by her relentless, exhausting effort. You may resent her. You may occasionally wish to disappear into the wallpaper to escape her plans, but she is the reason the plans exist at all. So as she finishes her tea and sets down her cup with the precision of a woman about to give orders, understand what you are looking at. Not merely a mother, but a strategist who has bet her entire life on a single, spectacular victory. And that victory, laced and pinned and terrified, is you. Let us talk about the season, which sounds charming, and is in fact a months-long endurance event in which you are politely paraded around like a very expensive show pony. There are balls, dinners, opera boxes, and garden parties, all designed to accomplish one thing: getting you seen by the right people, and ideally the right unmarried men. You will smile until your cheeks ache. You will dance with strangers. You will make delicate conversation about the weather while everyone in the room silently calculates your father's net worth. It is speed dating, except slower, sweatier, and with your entire family's reputation riding on whether you laugh at the correct moment. Let us begin with the debut, the grand unveiling in which a young woman is formally introduced to society. Before this moment you effectively do not exist, socially speaking. You are a girl, tucked away, being educated and polished in private. After it, you are officially on the market, available for consideration, open for inspection. It is a bit like a product launch, if the product were a nervous teenager in white satin, and the launch event involved several hundred people deciding whether she is worth their sons. The schedule alone is punishing. The season runs for months, and during it, you're expected to attend function after function, often several in a single day, each one requiring a different gown, a different set of manners, and a fresh reserve of charm you may not actually possess. There are afternoon calls, formal dinners, and balls that stretch until dawn. Sleep becomes a rumour. Your feet develop opinions, and through all of it, you must appear delighted, because a bored debutante is a failed debutante. Consider the ball itself, the crown jewel of the whole enterprise. You arrive, you are announced, and you enter a room engineered entirely for evaluation. Along the walls sit the matrons, the mothers, and the chaperones, watching everything, missing nothing. On your dance card, a small booklet with a tiny pencil, gentlemen inscribe their names to claim their dances. An empty card is a public humiliation. A full one is a triumph. Your entire evening's worth is measured in pencil marks made by men you have mostly never met. Ever walked into a party where you knew no one and felt every eye size you up in an instant? Now imagine that feeling is the actual stated purpose of the party, and that your family spent a fortune to put you in the centre of it. That is the season. The judgment is not a side effect. It is the whole point. You're there to be looked at, weighed, and discussed. And you must do it all while pretending you find the experience perfectly lovely. The conversation is its own minefield. You may not appear too clever, because a woman who is too clever is unsettling. You may not appear dull, because a dull woman is forgettable. You must strike a perfect, impossible balance, being interesting enough to be memorable but agreeable enough to be safe. Every remark is a small performance. Every silence is a risk. Somewhere across the room, your mother is watching your every gesture and mentally awarding or deducting points. And here is the exhausting arithmetic of it all. The season repeats. If you do not secure a match, you return the next year, slightly older, slightly less fresh, with the whispers beginning to gather. There is a shelf life to all this, spoken of only in hushed and cruel terms, and everyone is aware of it, especially you. So you dance, you smile, you sparkle on command, night after glittering night. It looks, from the outside, like the most enchanting time of a young woman's life. From the inside, it feels remarkably like a very long, very beautiful job interview that never quite ends. Now here is where things get interesting, because your money has a destination in mind, a title. All across the Atlantic sit crumbling castles owned by charming, penniless European aristocrats who have discovered a wonderful new import. American heiresses. You have a fortune and no pedigree. He has a pedigree and no fortune. Put the two together and everybody wins, except possibly the bride. These matches happened by the hundreds, trading railroad millions for the right to be called a duchess. It is the world's most elegant garage sale, and the item on the table, once again, is you. Let us understand the arithmetic behind this peculiar trade, because it is beautifully, coldly logical. The old aristocratic families of Europe were often magnificently broke. They had land, titles, ancient names, and enormous drafty houses, but land no longer generated the wealth it once had, and centuries of grand living had drained the coffers. What they had left was prestige, which does not pay for a new roof, and a great many roofs were leaking. Meanwhile, back home, families like yours had the opposite problem. Mountains of new money, generated in a single generation, and absolutely no social standing to match it. In your own country, old society sneered at the newness of your fortune. But across the ocean, that fortune could buy something money supposedly cannot buy. Rank. A title for the daughter, and by extension a shimmer of borrowed nobility for the entire family. It was an exchange so tidy it practically arranged itself. Think of it as two parties with complementary shortages meeting in a spectacularly upholstered marketplace. He needs cash to save the estate. You need a title to silence the sneers. The lawyers shake hands, the fortune crosses the Atlantic, and a girl who was born in a country with no aristocracy suddenly becomes her grace. Everyone congratulates everyone. Champagne is poured. Somewhere in the middle of the transaction sits an actual young woman, blinking, wondering when exactly she agreed to any of this. Ever traded something you loved for something you were told you needed, and felt that small, hollow lurch afterward? Now scale that up to a human life and a European castle, and you begin to sense the strange melancholy underneath all the glamour. Because the newspapers loved these matches, they called the brides dollar princesses and swooned over every detail. But a title is not a personality, and a castle is not a home, and a stranger with a coronet is still a stranger. The scale of it was remarkable. Over the span of a few decades, hundreds of wealthy American women married into the European aristocracy, and the total fortune that sailed overseas in the process was staggering, enough to rescue countless estates and fund countless lifestyles. Entire family fortunes, built by fathers and grandfathers through relentless work, were redirected toward propping up ancient houses that had contributed nothing but a name. But oh, what a name it was. And the men themselves? A mixed bag, as men tend to be. Some were kind, some were cold, some were genuinely charming, and some were merely charming enough to close the deal. A rare few even fell in love. But love was not the currency of this exchange, and everyone involved understood that perfectly well, even when they pretended otherwise for the sake of the papers. For you, the young woman at the centre of it, the trade means a future in a foreign land, among foreign customs, surrounded by people who may regard your fortune with gratitude and your origins with quiet contempt. You will be a duchess. You will also quite possibly be lonely in a way no amount of grandeur can fix, so congratulations are in order, technically. You're about to become royalty of a sort. Just try not to think too hard about the receipt. Let us discuss romance, or the strictly supervised imitation of it that passed for romance back then. You are never, under any circumstances, alone with a man. Ever. There is always a chaperone, usually an aunt or a hired matron, whose sole purpose in life is to sit 3 feet away and make sure nothing scandalous or frankly interesting ever happens. A brushed hand is a scandal. A private letter is a crisis. An unsupervised carriage ride could end your social career before it began. Every glance is monitored, every word measured. It is like being followed by a very judgmental referee who blows the whistle if you look happy. Let us properly introduce the chaperone, because she is a fixture of your life now. She may be a widowed aunt, a stern cousin, or a professional matron hired specifically to guard your reputation, which in this world is roughly as valuable as your dowry. She goes where you go. She sits where you sit. She has heard every conversation you have had with a man and remembers all of them. She is, in essence, a human security system, and she never, ever powers down. The logic behind all this vigilance is brutally simple. Your value on the marriage market depends entirely on your reputation, and your reputation is a fragile, flammable thing that can be destroyed by the faintest whisper. A single moment alone with a man, entirely innocent, could still spark a rumour, and a rumour is all it takes. So you are guarded like a national treasure, because in a very real sense to your family that is exactly what you are. Consider the sheer absurdity of courting under these conditions. You're meant to somehow determine whether you could spend your life with a man while never once being permitted to speak to him privately, touch him, or express anything resembling genuine feeling. Every interaction is a stiff, formal performance conducted in front of an audience. It is like being asked to fall in love through a pane of glass while a chaperone stands behind you, tapping her foot. Communication becomes an art form of tiny coded gestures. A particular flower carries a particular meaning. The way a fan is held can signal interest or refusal. A glance held a half-second too long is practically a declaration. An entire secret language blooms in the gaps that supervision cannot quite close, because human beings, denied the front door, will always find a window. It is remarkably resourceful and remarkably exhausting. Ever tried to have a real conversation while your parent hovered nearby, pretending not to listen but absolutely listening? Now imagine that every romantic moment of your youth happens exactly like that, and that the stakes are not embarrassment but your entire future. The chaperone is not there to ruin your fun. She genuinely believes she's protecting you, and by the standards of the time she is. That does not make her presence any less suffocating. Letters, when permitted at all, are a minefield. A written note can be saved, shared, and used as evidence, so any correspondence must be scrupulously proper, formal to the point of coldness. Whatever you actually feel must be buried beneath layers of polite nothing, in case the letter ends up in the wrong hands, which it frequently does. Passion in writing is simply too dangerous to risk, and so courtship becomes less a discovery of another person and more a careful negotiation conducted through intermediaries, gestures, and heavily supervised visits. You may marry a man having never once had an honest private conversation with him. You will learn who he truly is only after the wedding, when it is far too late to change your mind. So, enjoy your romance such as it is, performed at a respectable distance under a watchful eye. In this world, love is not something you fall into. It is something you are permitted to approach, slowly, formally, and never without a witness. It is time for the big moment, the proposal, which in your case has already largely happened without you in the room. While you are practicing your posture, the real conversation was taking place between your father and your future husband, or more likely their representatives. By the time anyone kneels or presents a ring, the matter is essentially settled. Your consent is a lovely formality, like a bow on a package that has already been mailed. You may be asked, you may even be given the illusion of choice, but make no mistake, the deal was closed somewhere between the brandy and the cigars. Let us trace how the real proposal actually unfolds, because it bears almost no resemblance to the scene in the paintings. It begins not with a man overcome by love, but with quiet inquiries, discreet conversations between families about whether a match might be mutually beneficial. Fortunes are assessed, titles are weighed, reputations are examined for cracks. All of this happens at a level far above your head, in drawing rooms and private clubs, long before anyone thinks to mention it to you. The men do the negotiating naturally because in this world money and property are men's concerns, and you are legally and practically a bit of both. Your father evaluates the suitor's rank and prospects. The suitor's family evaluates your father's fortune. It is less a courtship than a merger discussion, conducted with the seriousness of men who understand that a great deal of wealth is about to change hands, and that you are the vehicle through which it will travel. Consider how strange it is to be the subject of a decision rather than a participant in it. Your entire future, the man you will wake up beside for decades, the country you may live in, the children you will bear, all of it is being determined in conversations you're not invited to attend. You will be informed of the outcome the way one is informed of the weather, as a fact already in motion, entirely beyond your control. Ever had a decision made about your own life in a meeting you were not invited to, then been presented with the result as if it were a gift? That particular flavour of powerlessness, dressed up as good news, is the emotional core of the Gilded Age proposal. Someone hands you a wonderful outcome you had no hand in shaping and expects you to be grateful. And the maddening part is that refusing gratitude is not really an option. When the formal proposal finally arrives, it is theatre, and everyone knows it. The gentleman may indeed kneel, may indeed produce a ring, may indeed say tender words, and you may indeed say yes, blushing prettily, as though the answer were ever in doubt. But it is a scene performed for the sake of appearances, a pleasant fiction that lets everyone pretend the marriage sprang from romance rather than arithmetic. The kneeling is choreography. The suspense is entirely invented. Now, your consent is not always a pure formality. Occasionally a young woman does refuse, and occasionally that refusal is honoured, particularly if she has an unusually sympathetic father or a truly intolerable suitor. But refusal comes at a cost. It disappoints your mother, embarrasses your family, and squanders months of careful manoeuvring. The pressure to simply say yes and be done with it is immense, and most young women, worn down and out of options, eventually say it. There is a peculiar loneliness in being congratulated for something you did not choose. The whole household erupts in joy. The engagement is announced, well-wishers descend, and you stand at the centre of the celebration, newly promised to a man selected largely without you, smiling because smiling is expected. So enjoy your proposal, that beautiful, hollow performance. The ring is real, the sentiment is optional. And the decision, my friend, was made long before you entered the room. Now let us talk about the part nobody puts in the fairy tales, the paperwork. Before you walk down any aisle, lawyers on both sides will hammer out a marriage settlement, a document that specifies exactly how much of your family's fortune is being handed over and under what terms. We are talking sums that could fund small nations, often in railroad stock, real estate, or cold hard cash. Your groom's family cares deeply about these numbers, arguably more than they care about your groom. It is a merger agreement dressed in lace, and somewhere in the fine print, a girl is being converted into an asset. Let us open this document and marvel at its contents, because it is where the true nature of your marriage lives. It details the dowry, the vast sum your father provides, and specifies precisely how that money will be structured, invested, and controlled. It outlines what the groom's family gains, what you are entitled to, and what happens in various unpleasant scenarios nobody wishes to mention aloud. It is thorough, unsentimental, and utterly honest in a way the wedding itself will never be. The lawyers involved are not romantics. They are sharp, careful men whose job is to extract the best possible terms for their side, and they conduct their negotiations with all the warmth of men dividing a company. Every clause is contested. Every figure is scrutinized. The groom's side pushes for more, the bride's side protects what it can, and the fortune is sliced and allocated line by careful line, while the future spouses attend to the far more pleasant business of pretending none of this is happening. Consider the delicate matter of control, because this is where it stings. In much of this world, a wife's property and money legally pass into her husband's hands upon marriage. A clever settlement might carve out protections, sums set aside for the bride's own use, safeguards should the marriage sour. But often the fortune your family spent generations building simply becomes his to manage, spend, and enjoy. You are the bridge across which the money travels, and once it has crossed it may no longer be yours at all. Ever read the fine print on a contract only after signing it and felt your stomach drop? Now imagine that contract governs your entire married life, and that you were never even allowed to read it. That is the marriage settlement. The most consequential financial agreement of your existence is negotiated over your head, by men, for men, and you will learn its terms only if someone decides you ought to know them. The sums involved genuinely defy belief. A great heiress might come with a dowry large enough to rescue an entire aristocratic dynasty, restore a decaying estate, and fund a lifestyle of astonishing luxury for decades. When these figures leaked to the newspapers, and they always leaked, the public devoured them. People who would never see such money in 1,000 lifetimes read the totals with a mixture of awe and appetite. Your worth, printed plainly for all to consume. There is something quietly chilling in seeing yourself reduced to a number on a legal page. However charming the wedding, however lovely the gown, this document is the truth beneath it all. It says, in plain and binding language, exactly what you are worth and exactly what is being purchased. Love does not appear in the settlement. Love has no clause. Love, frankly, would only complicate the accounting. And so, Before a single vow is spoken, your marriage already exists on paper, defined not by affection but by assets, secured not with a kiss but with the signature. The romance, such as it is, will be added later for the guests. So when you admire that beautiful ring on your finger, remember there is a matching document in a lawyer's drawer, far less beautiful and infinitely more powerful. The ring is the story, the settlement is the truth. It is time to get dressed, and I hope you enjoyed breathing, because those days are numbered. Your maid appears with the corset, a garment of whalebone and steel designed to reshape your entire torso into something the era finds acceptable. She braces a foot against the bed frame and pulls the laces tight, then tighter still, until your waist reaches a circumference that no functioning organ should have to endure. You will not bend. You will not slouch. You will breathe in shallow little sips like a fish contemplating its choices. Fainting is common, expected, and honestly sometimes a welcome break from the day. Let us examine this instrument of fashion, because it is a genuine feat of engineering aimed squarely at your ribcage. The corset is built from sturdy fabric reinforced with strips of whalebone or steel, laced up the back so it can be cinched ever tighter. Its purpose is to sculpt your body into the fashionable silhouette of the day, a tiny waist flaring into hips and bust. An hourglass achieved not through nature but through sustained mechanical compression of your internal organs. It is essentially a full-body vice with excellent stitching. The process of being laced is a two-person affair, and it is not gentle. Your maid loosens the corset, settles it around you, and then begins the pulling, drawing the laces tighter with each round while you hold on to the bedpost for support. Some women, chasing the smallest possible waist, endure lacing so severe that they can barely inhale. The maid pulls, you gasp, the maid pulls again. By the end you're sealed into your own clothing like cargo strapped for a long voyage. Consider what this does to a body over time, because the effects are not merely uncomfortable. Tight lacing compresses the lungs, crowds the stomach, and pushes internal organs into arrangements nature never intended. Digestion suffers. Deep breathing becomes impossible. The famous fainting spells of delicate ladies were often less a matter of fragile emotion and more a matter of simply not getting enough air. A woman did not swoon because she was sensitive. She swooned because she was, quite literally, being squeezed. Ever worn jeans one size too small after a large meal and spent the evening regretting every choice that led you there? Now imagine that sensation applied to your entire torso, tightened by another person, worn for 16 hours a day, every day, for your whole adult life. That is the corset. It is not an occasional discomfort. It is a permanent condition, a garment you are laced into at dawn and only released from at night if you're lucky. The corset also governs how you move, and therefore how you appear. You cannot slouch, because the steel will not allow it. You cannot bend easily, so you learn to lower yourself with careful grace. You sit upright at all times, poised and elegant, because the alternative is physically impossible. In a strange way, the corset does its job perfectly. It produces a woman of flawless posture and refined bearing, mostly because it has removed her ability to be anything else. There is a quiet cruelty in the fact that all this suffering is meant to look effortless. You must appear serene, graceful, untroubled, floating through your day as though your ribs were not being slowly rearranged. To complain would be unladylike. To adjust it in public would be scandalous. So you endure in silence, smiling, while a cage of bone and steel dictates the terms of your every breath. And on your wedding day, of all days, the lacing will be tighter than ever, because the gown demands the smallest possible waist and the photographs must be perfect. You will marry a stranger while barely able to breathe, which is either a cruel irony or an oddly fitting metaphor, depending on how you look at it. So take a deep breath now, while you still can. In a moment, the laces come tight, and shallow little sips are all you will get until bedtime. Let us move on to grooming, which in your world is a full production requiring hours and several people. Your hair will be brushed, curled, padded, and pinned into an architectural marvel that defies both gravity and comfort. Your skin must be pale, so pale that sunlight is treated as a personal enemy, and you will carry a parasol as if the sun owes you money. Cosmetics exist, but must never look like cosmetics, because a lady who obviously wears makeup is only slightly better than a criminal. The goal is to appear effortlessly radiant, achieved through enormous effort that you will pretend never happened. Let us begin with the hair, because it alone can consume an hour or more of your morning. It must be brushed to a shine, then arranged into elaborate styles piled high upon your head, often supported by pads and false pieces to achieve the required volume. Pins by the dozen anchor the whole construction in place, digging quietly into your scalp throughout the day. The result is impressive, towering, and faintly torturous, a hairstyle you cannot lean back against, sleep in, or fully forget about for even a moment. Now consider the obsession with pale skin, because it reveals everything about this world's values. A tan meant labour, working outdoors, being common. Pale skin meant leisure, wealth, a life spent safely indoors away from the vulgar sun. So you guard your complexion like a jewel, shading yourself with parasols, wide hats and gloves, treating a single stray sunbeam as a threat to your entire social standing. The sun, to a lady of your station, is not warmth. It is the enemy, and it must be fended off at all costs. The lengths women went to for that prized paleness could be genuinely alarming. Some relied on powders and preparations to whiten the skin, a few of which contained ingredients we now know to be outright poisonous. Beauty in this era occasionally shaded into slow self-harm, women quite literally risking their health to achieve a fashionable pallor. The pursuit of looking effortlessly lovely sometimes meant applying things to your face that had no business being anywhere near it. Ever spent an hour getting ready only to have someone say you look so naturally pretty, and felt the strange mix of triumph and exhaustion that comes with the compliment you worked desperately for? That is the entire philosophy of Gilded Age beauty, distilled. Enormous, hidden effort, all in service of appearing as though you rolled out of bed radiant. The labour must be invisible. The moment it shows, the magic collapses, and so does your reputation. Cosmetics existed, but they walked a razor's edge. A respectable lady might use them, but only so subtly that no one could ever prove she had. Visible makeup was associated with actresses and women of ill repute, so the art lay entirely in concealment, in enhancing your features while leaving absolutely no evidence of having done so. A faint flush that looked natural, a brightness to the eyes that seemed like health rather than artifice. Get it wrong, apply a touch too much, and you crossed a line society did not forgive. The daily regimen extended to your hands, your nails, your teeth, your posture, every visible inch subject to scrutiny and correction. Hands were to be soft and white, protected by gloves. Nothing about you could suggest effort, roughness, or use. You were meant to appear as a being of pure decoration, untouched by the labour that in fact filled every hour of your morning. The contradiction was total, and you were expected to live inside it without complaint. And all of this, remember, is the routine, the everyday. On your wedding day it multiplies. Hours upon hours of preparation to achieve a perfection that will be photographed, described in newspapers, and remembered forever. The suffering is quiet, elegant, and constant, hidden beneath the radiant surface everyone will admire. So sit still, endure the pins and the powder and the careful, aching artistry of it all. You will look effortless. It will cost you the entire morning, and you must never ever let anyone see the price. Now let us talk about the trousseau, which is a fancy word for the mountain of clothing you must acquire before marriage, most of which you will wear once, if ever. We're talking dozens upon dozens of gowns, gloves, undergarments, nightwear, and accessories, many ordered directly from Paris because anything less would be embarrassing. The great couturier houses of France will dress you, and the bills will be staggering. Trunks upon trunks will be packed and shipped, forming a wardrobe so vast it requires its own inventory. You will own more clothing than you could wear in a decade, and somehow it still will not feel like enough. Let us grasp the scale of this collection, because it is genuinely difficult to comprehend. A proper trousseau might include morning gowns, afternoon gowns, dinner gowns, ball gowns, walking dresses, riding habits, tea gowns, and travelling costumes, each category requiring several examples in different fabrics and colours. Add to that the undergarments, the nightclothes, the shoes, the gloves in every length, the hats, the shawls, the parasols, and you arrive at a wardrobe that could clothe a small village, all belonging to one young woman about to be married. The finest of it comes from Paris, the undisputed capital of fashion, where legendary couturiers dress the wealthy women of the world. To wear a gown from one of these houses was to wear proof of your family's fortune and taste. The dresses were constructed with astonishing craftsmanship, hand-sewn, elaborately trimmed, fitted precisely to your body across multiple exhausting appointments. They are less garments than works of art, and they were priced accordingly, each one costing a sum that could have supported an ordinary family for months. Consider the logistics of acquiring all this, because it is a campaign in itself. There are consultations, fittings, and endless decisions about fabric, colour, and trim. There are seamstresses and their assistants, working long hours to complete the vast order in time for the wedding. There are the customs of ordering from abroad, the shipping across the ocean, the trunks arriving packed with tissue and treasure. Your mother oversees much of it with the intensity of a woman commanding a supply line, because in a sense she is. Ever bought an entire new wardrobe for a single occasion, worn most of it once, and then watched it hang in your closet as a monument to money spent? Now multiply that by an ocean voyage and a fortune, and you begin to sense the peculiar excess of the trousseau. Much of this clothing will be worn a handful of times, some of it never. Its purpose fulfilled simply by existing, by proving that you arrived at your marriage properly and lavishly equipped. There is a strange logic underneath the extravagance. The trousseau announces that you come to your husband complete, needing nothing, a bride whose family has provided for her every conceivable need. It is a statement of wealth, yes, but also of respectability, of a family that has done things properly and can prove it in silk and satin. The clothing is armour of a sort, protection against the whispers that a bride was sent off cheaply or unprepared. The undergarments alone deserve mention, layer upon layer of chemises, petticoats and fine linen, much of it embroidered and trimmed with lace no one but you and your maid will ever see. Even the hidden layers must be exquisite, because a true lady is beautifully dressed all the way down, whether or not anyone is looking. The standard does not relax simply because the garment is private. If anything, the private perfection is the truer test of your quality, and when it is all assembled, packed and ready, it forms a kind of portable kingdom of cloth, travelling with you into your new life. You will unpack it in a foreign house, hang it in unfamiliar wardrobes, and slowly discover how much of it you will never actually need. So admire your trousseau, that glorious, absurd, towering mountain of clothing. It cost a fortune, it proves your worth, and most of it, my friend, will simply wait in trunks, beautifully, expensively, for a day that may never come. It is time for the star of the show, the gown itself, and no expense will be spared, because this dress will be described in every newspaper in the country by tomorrow morning. Yards of white satin, clouds of imported lace, seed pearls stitched by hand until seamstresses go half blind. The train alone may stretch longer than a modern living room and require multiple attendants just to move. It weighs a small fortune and feels like it. You will stand for endless fittings, holding your arms out like a scarecrow while an army of dressmakers circles you with pins, whispering about your posture. Let us consider the fabric first, because it sets the tone for the entire spectacle. Only the finest silk satin will do, shipped from the great weaving centres of Europe, chosen for a sheen that catches candlelight and holds it. Over the satin drapes lace so delicate and costly that it is sold by the yard at prices that could buy livestock. Sometimes handmade lace passed down through families, sometimes commissioned fresh for the occasion. The result shimmers and floats, a garment engineered to make you look less like a person and more like an expensive apparition. Then come the pearls and the beadwork, applied by hand, one tiny stitch at a time. Seamstresses bend over the fabric for weeks, sewing thousands of seed pearls into patterns of flowers and scrolls until their eyes ache and their fingers cramp. Each bead is a small labour, and there may be tens of thousands of them. The gown that takes you minutes to walk down the aisle in represents months of quiet, anonymous toil by women whose names will never appear in any of the newspapers describing your dress. Consider the train, that magnificent, ridiculous extension of fabric trailing behind you. It is a statement of pure excess, length equaling grandeur, and the longer it is, the more important you appear. But it does not move itself. Attendants must lift and arrange it, walking behind you in careful coordination, and you must learn to move so it flows rather than tangles. A train is not a convenience. It is a burden you wear proudly, dragging yardage of priceless satin across the floor, because subtlety was never the point. Ever worn an outfit so elaborate and heavy that you could barely move, and spent the whole event managing the clothing instead of enjoying yourself? Now imagine that outfit weighs as much as a sack of grain, took months to build, and is being scrutinised by hundreds of guests and every reporter in the country. That is the wedding gown. It is not something you wear so much as something you operate, a magnificent, exhausting machine of satin and pearl that you must pilot with grace. The fittings themselves are their own ordeal. You stand for hours while dressmakers adjust, pin and tuck, circling you, murmuring instructions, asking you to hold still just a moment longer. Your arms grow heavy from being held out. Your feet ache. And through it all you must remain patient and poised, because the gown must be perfect. And perfection, as always in your world, is achieved through the quiet suffering of the woman wearing it. There is real pressure riding on this single garment. It will define you in the public imagination. It will be sketched, described, and compared to the gowns of other brides. A triumph elevates your family. A disappointment invites whispers. So the dress must not merely be beautiful. It must be the most beautiful, a flawless statement of wealth, taste, and status stitched into every seam. And so you stand, arms out, pinned and draped and admired, becoming the centerpiece everyone came to see. The gown is glorious. The gown is crushing. And tomorrow the whole country will read about it before they read about you. Let us admire the jewels, because in the Gilded Age, subtlety is for people who cannot afford diamonds. You will be draped in them. Necklaces, tiaras, brooches, bracelets, each one chosen to announce your family's fortune before you even open your mouth. The pieces are heavy, both literally and symbolically, and some are worth more than the houses most people will ever live in. Your ring is not merely a token of love, it is a receipt. Every stone on your body is doing quiet, sparkling arithmetic, reminding the room exactly how much this arrangement cost and exactly what you are worth on paper. Let us start at the top, with the tiara, because nothing signals aspiration quite like wearing a small crown. For the American heiress marrying into European nobility, a tiara was practically a rite of passage, a glittering announcement that you had arrived among the titled. Set with diamonds and sometimes other precious stones, it perched atop your elaborate hair, catching every light in the room. It was heavy, both on your head and in meaning, a physical burden that also happened to broadcast your new rank to everyone who saw you. Then come the necklaces, ropes of diamonds or pearls layered at the throat, each strand adding to the impression of bottomless wealth. Brooches pinned to the bodice, bracelets stacked at the wrist, earrings pulling at the lobes, all working together toward a single overwhelming effect. You're not simply wearing jewelry. You're wearing your family's fortune, converted into gemstones and displayed on your body for public assessment. The message is unmistakable, and it is meant to be. Consider the weight of it all, because it is not merely a figure of speech. Real gemstones set in real metal are genuinely heavy, and a full complement of them presses on the neck, the ears, the head and the wrists throughout the long hours of the day. By evening, the tiara alone can leave your scalp aching and your neck stiff. Splendor, once again, comes with physical cost, and you carry the literal weight of wealth on your body until you're finally permitted to set it down. Ever worn something expensive and felt strangely more like its guardian than its owner, hyper-aware of its value with every movement? Now imagine you are covered head to foot in irreplaceable treasures, some of them borrowed, some of them centuries old, and that hundreds of eyes are tracking every glittering piece. That is the experience of the jeweled bride. The diamonds are dazzling, yes, but they are also a responsibility, and you wear them with a quiet, constant vigilance beneath your radiant smile. Now let us examine the ring, that small circle carrying enormous meaning, though perhaps not the meaning you might hope. Yes, it symbolizes the union. But in your world it also functions as a display of the groom's resources and the seriousness of the arrangement, a gem chosen to impress as much as to please. It sparkles on your finger as a token of love, technically, but it is equally a marker of transaction, a beautiful little seal on a deal negotiated by others. The jewels also carry history and politics, especially among the old families. Certain pieces are heirlooms, passed down through generations laden with meaning and expectation. To wear them is to be absorbed into a lineage, to become a link in a chain of women who wore the same stones before you. The jewels are not truly yours. You are merely their current keeper, entrusted with them until you pass them along in turn. So stand tall beneath your glittering armor, draped in fortunes and framed in fire. The jewels announce everything the world needs to know about your value. They are breathtaking, they are heavy, and every last stone is quietly, brilliantly keeping score. Now let us wade into the vast, terrifying swamp of etiquette, a set of rules so numerous and specific that people wrote entire books about them. There is a correct way to hold a fork, enter a room, greet an equal, greet an inferior, and leave a calling card. There are rules about who speaks first, who bows, who sits where, and how long you may look at someone before it becomes rude. One misstep, one wrong utensil, one overly familiar greeting, and the whispers begin. Society does not forgive mistakes. It collects them, files them, and brings them up at the worst possible moment. Let us begin with the dinner table, that glittering battlefield where reputations are quietly won and lost. Before you sits a bewildering array of silverware, sometimes a dozen pieces or more, each intended for a specific course and to be used in a specific order. Forks for fish, forks for salad, forks for dessert, spoons whose purposes you must simply know, knives arranged with mysterious precision. The rule is to work from the outside in, but knowing that does not calm the panic of a young woman certain she's about to reach for the wrong one in front of a duchess. Then there is the elaborate choreography of greeting, which varies entirely depending on who stands before you. You greet a social superior one way, and a social inferior another, and confusing the two is a catastrophe. The depth of a bow, the warmth of an acknowledgement, whether you offer your hand or merely incline your head, all of it is dictated by rank, and all of it must be calculated instantly and correctly. To be too warm with someone beneath you is undignified. To be too familiar with someone above you is unforgivable. Consider the humble calling card, that small rectangle governing an entire elaborate social ritual. There are rules for when to leave one, how many to leave, whether to turn down a corner, and what that turned corner signifies. Leaving a card was how you signalled your existence, requested acceptance, and navigated the delicate hierarchy of who acknowledged whom. Get the ritual wrong, and you announced yourself as an ignorant outsider, someone who did not know the code and therefore did not belong. Ever attended a formal event terrified of using the wrong fork or greeting someone incorrectly, so anxious about the rules that you could not enjoy a single moment? Now imagine that anxiety is not occasional but constant, that every meal, every introduction, every social encounter of your entire life is a test you can fail, and that failure is remembered forever. That is life under Gilded Age etiquette. The rules never sleep, and neither quite do you. The purpose of all this complexity is not merely refinement, it is exclusion. The rules are deliberately intricate precisely so they cannot be learned quickly or faked convincingly. They separate those raised inside society from those clawing their way in, and for a family of new money like yours, they are a gauntlet. One slip reveals your origins. One error whispers that you do not truly belong, no matter how many railroads your father owns, and the punishment for error is subtle, but severe. No one shouts, no one corrects you openly. Instead, an eyebrow lifts, a glance is exchanged, a silence stretches a beat too long. Later, in other drawing rooms, your mistake is discussed with quiet relish. Society polices itself through gossip and cold disapproval, and its memory is long and merciless. So learn the rules, all 1,000 of them, and perform them flawlessly while appearing utterly at ease. The forks, the bows, the cards, the endless invisible lines you must never cross. It is exhausting. It is absurd. And in this world, it is the difference between belonging and being quietly, permanently shut out. Let us talk about the gatekeeper, because in this world one woman decides whether your family truly exists. She keeps a list, famously said to hold 400 names, supposedly the number who could fit comfortably in her ballroom. To be on the list is to be somebody. To be left off is to be nothing, no matter how many railroads your father owns. New money like yours must claw and charm its way toward acceptance, and a single wedding attended by the right people can settle the question forever. Your entire family is holding its breath, waiting to see who says yes. Let us understand the power this woman wields, because it is almost impossible to overstate. She is the arbiter of who belongs and who does not, the keeper of the invisible gate through which all social legitimacy must pass. Her approval can elevate a family overnight. Her disdain can render them invisible despite all their millions. She was not elected to this role and answers to no one. She simply assumed it, and society in its strange way agreed to obey. The famous number, 400, took on a life of its own, becoming shorthand for the true elite, the inner circle of those who mattered. Whether the figure was ever precise hardly matters. What matters is that everyone understood the principle. There was an in and there was an out, and the line between them was drawn by a single formidable hand. To be counted among the 400 was to have arrived at the very summit of American society. Consider the peculiar agony of new money in this system. Your father may command a fortune vaster than half the old families combined, and still society may regard you as vulgar upstarts, your wealth too fresh, your name too new. Money alone does not open the gate. It must be laundered into respectability through the right marriages, the right invitations, the right nods from the right people, and the person whose nod matters most is her. Ever desperately wanted to be accepted by a group that held itself just out of reach, doing everything right and still waiting anxiously to see if you would be let in. Now imagine that group controls your family's entire future, that your children's prospects depend on it, and that its leader can decide your fate with a single raised eyebrow. That is the position of the aspiring family, and the anxiety it produces is bottomless. Acceptance is everything, and it is never guaranteed. This is where your wedding becomes a weapon of extraordinary power. A grand society wedding, attended by the right names, blessed by the right presents, can accomplish in a single afternoon what years of careful manoeuvring could not. If the gatekeeper attends, or sends her blessing, or simply allows the right people to be seen there, your family's status is confirmed before all the world. The wedding is not merely a celebration. It is a bid for permanent legitimacy. The tension in your household in the days before is almost unbearable. Will she come? Will the acceptance cards arrive from the families that matter? Every response is scrutinized for meaning. A yes from an important name is a triumph. A cool silence is a wound. Your mother, who has fought for this moment for years, hovers on a knife's edge, because she knows the whole campaign may be decided by who chooses to walk through the church doors. So much rests on the whim of one woman and the fragile arithmetic of a guest list. It is arbitrary, unfair, and completely real. Your family's place in the world hangs on her approval, and there is nothing to do but present yourselves flawlessly and wait. So hold your breath along with everyone else. The list is real, the gate is real, and somewhere a formidable woman is deciding, with the stroke of a pen, whether you exist at all. It is time to assemble the guest list, a document more politically sensitive than any treaty. Every name is a statement. Invite the wrong person, and you insult the right ones. Forget someone important, and you make an enemy for life. Your mother pores over it for weeks, seating rival families as far apart as physically possible, while pretending it is a coincidence. Old money must be flattered, new money must be managed, and everyone must be arranged so that no feud erupts over the soup course. It is less a party and more a carefully defused bomb, garnished with flowers. Let us appreciate the sheer delicacy of the task, because a guest list at this level is an act of high diplomacy. Each name included sends a message, and each name omitted sends a louder one. To invite a family is to acknowledge their importance. To overlook them is to declare, publicly, that they do not matter to you. And in a world governed by pride and grudges, such declarations are not forgotten. A single missing name can spark a rivalry that outlasts the marriage itself. Then there is the matter of balance, the careful weighing of factions. Old established families must be present to lend the affair legitimacy, but they must be handled with deference, never made to feel that they are sharing the room with unworthy company. Newer families, allies of your own house, must be included to show strength, but not so prominently that the old guard takes offence. Every invitation is a calculation, every inclusion a small political decision with consequences. Consider the nightmare of the seating arrangement, a puzzle that can consume weeks of your mother's life. Certain families despise certain others, and seating them within speaking distance risks open unpleasantness. Rank must be respected, so the most important guests sit in the most honoured positions, and any error in placement is a public insult. Your mother maps the tables like a general positioning troops, keeping enemies apart, honouring the powerful, and ensuring that no one has grounds for complaint. It is exhausting, thankless work, and it must appear entirely effortless. Ever agonized over who to invite to an event, terrified of offending someone or seating the wrong people together, replaying the possibilities late into the night. Now imagine the guests are among the most powerful and prideful people in the country, that their grudges are legendary, and that a single misstep could damage your family for a generation. That is the guest list. It is not planning a party. It is negotiating a fragile peace among people who would happily snub one another given the slightest excuse. The list also functions as a public ledger of your family's connections, read and interpreted by everyone who sees it. The presence of certain names elevates the entire event. Their absence raises questions. People notice who was invited and who was not, and they draw conclusions about your family's standing accordingly. The guest list is, in effect, a statement of exactly where you sit in the social order, published through the simple fact of who shows up, and securing the acceptances is its own drama. An invitation is only half the story. The reply is what counts. Each acceptance from an important family is a small victory, proof that your household is worth associating with. Each polite refusal is a quiet blow, a hint that perhaps you are not quite as established as you hoped. Your mother reads the responses like a fortune teller reading cards, searching each one for its true meaning. So the list grows, shrinks, and is revised again and again, agonized over syllable by syllable. It looks, in the end, like a simple roster of names. It is in fact a map of alliances, insults, ambitions, and fears, a bomb diffused one careful placement at a time. So admire the finished guest list, that innocent-looking piece of paper. It cost weeks of worry and no small amount of cunning, and every single name on it, present or absent, is saying something. Let us turn to the invitations, because even the paper you send matters enormously. The stationery must be the finest available, engraved rather than printed, because printing is what common people do. The wording follows rigid formulas passed down like scripture, and a single incorrect phrase marks your family as hopeless amateurs. Each one is addressed by hand in flawless script, sealed and dispatched by an army of servants. The response cards will be studied like tea leaves, each acceptance a small victory, each polite decline a quiet wound. In this world, a wedding invitation is not a request. It is a test, and everybody is grading. Let us begin with the paper itself, because the physical object carries meaning before a single word is read. It must be thick, heavy, and of the highest quality, the kind of stationery that announces wealth simply by its weight in the hand. Cheap or flimsy paper would be an embarrassment, a signal that your family either could not afford better, or worse, did not know better. The invitation is the first thing a guest touches of your wedding, and it must feel like money the moment it does. Then there is the crucial distinction between engraving and printing. An engraved invitation, in which the letters are pressed into the paper through a costly and labour-intensive process, is the only acceptable choice for a family of standing. Printing, cheaper and faster, is what ordinary people use, and to send a printed invitation would mark you instantly as pretenders. The difference is subtle, felt more than seen, a slight raised texture to the letters, but those who matter will notice, and noticing is the entire point. Consider the wording, which follows conventions so rigid they might as well be carved in stone. There is correct form for every phrase, a proper way to name the hosts, announce the couple, and request the honour of a guest's presence. These formulas are not to be improvised or personalised. They are to be followed exactly, because they are how those in the know demonstrate that they are in fact in the know. A clever variation is not clever. It is a mistake, and a revealing one. Ever sent something out into the world, a message or a piece of writing, and then obsessed over whether the tone was exactly right, terrified that one wrong word had ruined the whole impression? Now imagine that hundreds of the most judgmental people in the country will receive your effort, scrutinize it for errors, and quietly grade your family accordingly. That is the wedding invitation. It is not merely a notice of a date. It is a demonstration of whether your family truly knows how things are done. The addressing too must be perfect, executed by hand in elegant script, because there is no acceptable shortcut. Names and titles must be rendered exactly correctly, for to misstate a person's rank or style is a genuine insult. Some households employ someone specifically skilled in this fine penmanship, and the work takes days, each envelope a small act of careful reverence. Then the invitations are sealed and sent out into the world, carrying your family's reputation with them, and then comes the waiting and the reading of the replies. Each response card that returns is examined closely, an acceptance from an important family bringing quiet triumph, a polite refusal bringing quiet worry. The pattern of replies reveals your family's true standing more honestly than anything else, and your mother tracks them with the intensity of someone tallying votes in an election whose outcome will define her life. So treat the invitations with the seriousness they demand, for they are far more than paper. They are your family's calling card to the world, a test of your fluency in the sacred language of society. So send them out, flawlessly engraved and perfectly worded, and then hold your breath. Everyone is grading, and the marks are already being recorded. Now let us admire the wedding gifts, which will not be quietly tucked away but proudly displayed for all to see. Silver, crystal, jewellery, and objects whose only purpose is to be expensive will be laid out in a dedicated room so guests can marvel and more importantly compare. Some families even hired guards to watch over the glittering pile, because nothing says love like armed security. The value of the gifts is public knowledge, discussed openly, and any donor who gives too modestly will be noted and remembered. It is regifting anxiety on an industrial scale, with everybody keeping score. Let us step into the display room, because it is a spectacle in its own right. An entire room, sometimes one of the grandest in the house, is given over to the presentation of the gifts, arranged on tables draped in fine cloth, so each item can be seen and admired. Silver services gleam, crystal catches the light, jewellery rests on velvet, and objects of every description compete for attention. Guests are invited to stroll through and view the collection, and view it they do with keen and calculating eyes. The gifts themselves tend toward the magnificent and the useless in equal measure. Elaborate silver, ornate serving pieces, decorative objects whose entire purpose is to demonstrate that the giver could afford something extravagant. Practicality is beside the point. Nobody gives the daughter of a fortune something she actually needs. The gift must impress, must signal the wealth and taste of the giver, and must hold its own among the dozens of other treasures on display. Function is irrelevant. Grandeur is everything. Consider the presence of guards, which sounds absurd until you consider the value assembled in that single room. With so many precious objects gathered in one place, and so many people passing through to view them, the risk was real enough that families sometimes hired men to watch over the collection. There is something wonderfully telling about a celebration of love that requires security personnel to protect the loot. The gifts were treasures, and treasures, as everyone knew, attract trouble. Ever received a gift in front of others and felt the room silently assess it, everyone quietly noting its cost and what it implied about the giver's regard for you. Now imagine that every gift you receive is displayed publicly, its value common knowledge, and that the givers themselves walk through to see how their offering measures up against the rest. That is the gift display. It transforms generosity into competition, and it turns the simple act of giving into a public ranking of who values your family most. For the givers, this creates genuine anxiety. A gift that seems too modest beside the others reflects poorly on the giver, suggesting either a lack of means or a lack of respect. So guests feel pressure to give lavishly, to hold their own in the display, to avoid the quiet shame of the underwhelming offering placed beside a rival's splendor. The pressure runs in every direction, and the result is a room groaning under the weight of competitive generosity. The display also serves as yet another measure of your family's standing, because the quality and quantity of gifts reflect the wealth and importance of your social circle. A room overflowing with magnificent offerings from important names proclaims your family's connections. A sparse or modest collection would whisper the opposite. So the gifts, like everything else in this world, become a form of scorekeeping, a tangible tally of exactly how much you matter. And so the treasures pile up, gleaming and guarded, admired and appraised, each one a small statement in the ongoing conversation about status. It is love, technically, rendered in silver and crystal and mutual calculation. So walk through the display room, past the glittering evidence of everyone's regard and everyone's anxiety. It is dazzling, it is guarded, and every piece, quietly, is being counted. It is time to select the church, and naturally it must be the fashionable one, the sanctuary where all the right people are married and seen. A humble neighbourhood chapel simply will not do. The building must be grand, the address impeccable, and the congregation studded with names that matter. Booking it is a competition in itself, since every society family wants the same handful of venues on the same handful of desirable dates. The church becomes a stage, the pews become premium seating, and the sacred ceremony becomes, whether the clergy like it or not, the most exclusive show in town. Let us understand why the choice of church matters so enormously, because it is about far more than faith. The fashionable churches were the ones where society gathered, where the great families worshipped and married and were seen worshipping and marrying. To wed in one of these was to place your ceremony within the geography of the elite, to associate your family with the addresses that carried weight. The building itself lent prestige, and prestige, as always, was the true object of the exercise. The grandeur of the setting was essential. A soaring sanctuary with impressive architecture, fine stonework, and a suitably majestic interior provided the backdrop that a society wedding demanded. The space had to be worthy of the gowns, the jewels, the hundreds of important guests. A modest chapel, however sincere, would shrink the whole affair, and shrinking was unacceptable. The wedding was a production, and a production requires a stage grand enough to hold it. Consider the fierce competition for the best venues on the best dates. There were only so many fashionable churches and only so many desirable times of year to marry, and every ambitious family wanted the same ones. Securing a prime church for a prime date became a contest, a matter of connections and timing and sometimes sheer persistence. To win the venue everyone wanted was itself a small triumph, a sign that your family had the influence to claim what others could not. Ever chosen a location for an important event based less on what you personally wanted and more on how it would look to others, on the impression the address itself would make? Now imagine that the venue is a house of worship, that the entire elite of the city is watching to see where you marry, and that the choice will be read as a statement of your family's exact position in the hierarchy. That is the selection of the church. The sacred and the social become hopelessly tangled, and the social usually wins. There is quiet irony in all of this that the clergy could hardly have missed. A wedding is meant to be a solemn religious rite, a sacred vow made before the divine, yet in this world the ceremony often functioned as a glittering social event first, and a spiritual one somewhere further down the list. The church filled with people who came to see and be seen, to observe the gowns and note the guests, and the holy purpose of the occasion competed for attention with the entirely worldly spectacle unfolding in the pews. The church, once chosen, transformed into a theatre. The best pews became coveted seats, assigned by importance, and where a guest sat signalled their standing just as surely as a place at the dinner table. Guests dressed to be admired. The whole congregation became part of the performance, and the ceremony at the altar was, in a sense, merely the centrepiece of a much larger show about wealth and belonging. So choose your church with care, weighing its grandeur and its address and the names that fill its pews. It will host your vows, yes, but it will also host your family's bid for the status. So book the fashionable sanctuary, claim the coveted date, and prepare the stage. The ceremony is sacred in theory. In practice, it is the hottest ticket in society. Let us talk about the flowers, because a Gilded Age wedding does not use flowers so much as declare war with them. Entire greenhouses will be emptied. Roses, lilies, orchids, and palms will be shipped in by the wagon load, many of them out of season, and therefore ruinously expensive, which is precisely the point. The church will be transformed into a scented jungle, garlands dripping from every column, arches of blossoms framing the aisle. The perfume will be overwhelming, bordering on a health hazard. Somewhere beneath 10,000 petals there is a wedding happening, and the flowers alone cost more than a family home. Let us grasp the scale of the floral assault, because restraint is nowhere in evidence. Flowers arrive not in bouquets but in quantities better measured by the wagon load, enough to bury the church interior beneath a living carpet of blossom. Every surface that can hold a flower does. Columns are wrapped, altars are smothered, windowsills overflow, and the aisle becomes a corridor through a manufactured garden. The goal is not decoration but transformation, turning a stone sanctuary into something resembling an enchanted forest that happens to host a ceremony. The choice of flowers matters as much as the quantity. Roses, lilies and orchids signal luxury, and palms lend an exotic grandeur. But the true extravagance lies in defying the seasons. To fill a church with blooms that should not exist at that time of year, flowers forced in heated greenhouses or shipped from warmer climates at enormous cost, is to demonstrate a wealth so vast it can override nature itself. Out-of-season flowers are expensive precisely because they are difficult, and difficulty converted into money is exactly the message. Consider the labour behind this floral avalanche. Armies of florists work through the night, constructing garlands, wiring arches, and arranging displays that must be perfect by morning. Greenhouses are stripped of their entire stock. Deliveries arrive in a steady stream, and skilled hands transform raw flowers into elaborate architecture of petal and stem. It is a massive, frantic undertaking, all for blooms that will wilt within a day or two, their glory as fleeting as the ceremony they adorn. Ever walked into a space so heavily perfumed that the scent became almost too much? Pleasant at first, but eventually overwhelming, until you longed for a breath of plain air. Now imagine an entire church packed with thousands of fragrant flowers, their combined perfume thick enough to make the head swim, and hundreds of guests sealed inside with it for the length of a ceremony. That is the floral wedding. The beauty is undeniable, and so, after a while, is the faint desire to step outside and breathe. This staggering cost is not an unfortunate byproduct. It is the entire purpose. Spending a fortune on flowers that will be dead within days is a display of wealth so pure it borders on defiance. A statement that your family can afford to lavish enormous sums on something utterly temporary. The very wastefulness is the point. Anyone can buy something lasting. Only the truly rich can afford to spend a fortune on beauty designed to vanish by week's end. There is a strange poetry in it, this deliberate embrace of the fleeting. The flowers represent everything the wedding itself embodies, immense expense poured into a single perfect temporary moment. They bloom in glory for a day and are gone, having served their purpose simply by being briefly, extravagantly magnificent. In their short, costly splendour, they are the perfect emblem of the whole affair. So drown the church in flowers, empty the greenhouses, defy the seasons, and let the perfume hang thick in the air. It is breathtaking. It is absurd. It is a fortune arranged in petals destined to wilt by the time the newspapers finish describing it. Now let us gather the bridesmaids, a small squadron of young women selected with the same care as everything else, meaning with maximum strategy and minimum sentiment. They must be lovely, but not so lovely that they outshine you, well connected but not too grand, and dressed in gowns coordinated to flatter the bride above all. Their job is to frame you, to make you glow by comparison, to move your endless train without tripping, and to smile through hours of standing. It is an honour, technically. It is also unpaid labour performed in a heavy dress while pretending to be thrilled. Let us examine how these young women are chosen, because sentiment ranks surprisingly low among the criteria. Certainly friendship plays a part, but so does strategy. A bridesmaid should come from a good family because her presence reflects on the wedding and on you. She should be presentable and charming because she will be on display. And crucially, she should complement the bride without competing, enhancing the overall picture while never drawing too much attention to herself. Selecting bridesmaids is less about honouring your dearest companions and more about assembling a flattering supporting cast. The delicate matter of appearance deserves particular attention. A bridesmaid should be attractive enough to make the wedding party look lovely, but not so striking that she eclipses the bride, for on this day, above all others, you must be the most beautiful woman in the room. This creates a subtle and slightly ruthless calculation, a desire for handsome attendants who nonetheless know their place in the visual hierarchy. The bridesmaids are the frame, you are the portrait, and no frame should ever outshine the picture it surrounds. Consider their gowns, coordinated with exquisite care and always in service of the bride. The bridesmaids' dresses are chosen to harmonize with the overall scheme and, above all, to make you look radiant by comparison. Their attire must be pleasing but not too splendid, coordinated but subtly subordinate. Every choice, from colour to cut, is made with the effect on the bride in mind. The bridesmaids dress not to shine themselves, but to help you shine. And the finest arrangement is one in which they look well while you look magnificent. Ever been asked to be part of someone's important day, agreed with genuine warmth, and then discovered that the role involved considerable expense, effort, and hours of smiling on command? Now imagine you must purchase or commission a specific gown, stand for a very long time in it, manage the bride's enormous train, and radiate delight throughout, all as a supporting player in someone else's spectacle. That is the bridesmaid's lot. It is framed as a privilege, and in a sense it is. But it is also a great deal of unpaid, uncomfortable work. Their duties on the day itself are real and demanding. They must manage the train, that magnificent burden of satin trailing behind you, lifting and arranging it so it flows gracefully and never tangles. They must stand for the length of the ceremony, poised and still. They must attend to you, anticipate your needs, and present a picture of serene joy no matter how their feet ache or their corsets pinch. The role looks decorative, and it is, but it is also a job with genuine responsibilities. There is, too, a quiet social dimension to being a bridesmaid, for the girls chosen are seen and noted by all the eligible young men in attendance. To stand up in a fashionable wedding was to be presented in a sense to appear before society in a flattering context. So the role carried a hidden benefit, a chance to be admired and perhaps to attract notice of one's own, a small compensation for the hours of service in a heavy gown. So gather your bridesmaids, chosen for their looks, their connections, and their willingness to shine just dimly enough. They will frame you beautifully, manage your train faithfully, and smile through it all. It is an honour, truly. It is also, when you look closely, a job. It is finally the morning, the day itself, and the house has erupted into controlled panic. You are woken early, fed almost nothing because the gown does not allow for a full stomach, and handed over to the team who will spend hours turning you into a vision. There are last-minute crises, a missing glove, a wilting flower, a maid in tears. Your mother oscillates between euphoria and fury. Outside, crowds are already gathering to gawk because a society wedding is public entertainment. And somewhere in all of this stands you, laced and pinned and about to marry a man you barely know. Let us walk through the sheer scale of the morning's operation because it resembles a military campaign more than a celebration. Dozens of people are in motion before dawn, servants and dressmakers and hairdressers, each with a role, each racing against the clock. There is a schedule, and it is brutal, every hour accounted for, every task timed to the minute. The bride must be ready precisely when the ceremony demands, and getting her there requires the coordinated labour of a small workforce moving through the house like a well-drilled army. Your own preparation begins early and stretches for hours. There is the bath, the hair, the endless application of every element of your appearance, and finally the gown itself, lowered over you and fastened into place. Through all of it, you must sit or stand patiently, a passive centrepiece being assembled by many hands. You're not so much getting ready as being manufactured, transformed piece by careful piece into the flawless vision the day requires. Consider the crises, because there are always crises. A glove goes missing at the worst possible moment. A flower wilts and must be replaced. A seam gives way, a pin is lost, a maid dissolves into tears under the pressure. Small disasters erupt in every corner, and each one feels, in the fevered atmosphere of the morning, like a potential catastrophe. The household lurches from one emergency to the next, and somehow, through sheer frantic effort, everything is resolved just in time, ever prepared for an event so important that the pressure turned the whole morning into a blur of nerves and last-minute panic, your stomach in knots, everyone around you fraying at the edges. Now imagine that event is your own wedding, attended by hundreds of the most important people in the country and reported in every newspaper, and that you're being laced, pinned and assembled while barely allowed to eat. That is the morning of the Gilded Age wedding. The stakes are enormous, the tension is unbearable, and it has only just begun. Your mother, of course, is at the storm's centre, veering between rapture and rage. This is the culmination of everything she has worked toward, the great victory she has fought years to secure, and her emotions run wild as the hour approaches. One moment she's overcome with joy, the next she is snapping at a servant over some trivial imperfection. She's exhilarated and terrified in equal measure, and the household absorbs her every mood like a ship riding out weather. And outside the public is already assembling. A grand society wedding was a genuine spectacle, and ordinary people gathered in the streets to catch a glimpse of the gowns, the carriages, the famous guests. You are entertainment for the masses, your private moment turned into a show for strangers who will never know you, but will happily discuss your dress for days. Privacy, on this of all mornings, is simply not available to you. So there you stand at last at the eye of the storm, laced and pinned and complete, ready to be delivered to a ceremony that will bind you to a stranger. The panic swirls around you. The crowds wait outside, and you, the reason for all of it, take one shallow, corseted breath and prepare to begin. Let us step into the ceremony, the moment everything is built toward. You process down the aisle at a solemn crawl, weighed down by satin and expectation, past hundreds of faces that have come as much to judge as to celebrate. The vows are exchanged, the ring is placed, the words are spoken, and it is all over in a matter of minutes, which feels absurd given the month of preparation. You are now married. You feel perhaps very little, or a strange mix of relief and dread. But there is no time to sit with it, because the performance is only halfway done and the guests are hungry. Let us begin with the procession, that slow and deliberate walk down the aisle that everyone has waited to witness. You move at a measured pace, unable to hurry even if you wished to, weighed down by yards of satin and the eyes of every guest in the church. The train drags behind you, tended by your attendants. The music swells, and you advance through the scented, flower-choked sanctuary as hundreds of faces turn toward you, taking in every detail of the vision your household spent the morning constructing. Consider what those faces are actually doing, because it is not simply admiration. Certainly some have come to celebrate, to wish you well, to share in a joyful occasion, but many have come to observe and assess, to note the gown, appraise the jewels, evaluate the flowers, and form opinions to be shared later in other drawing rooms. The ceremony is a performance before a critical audience, and you are its star, walking slowly enough for everyone to complete their inspection. The rite itself proceeds with solemn formality. The words are spoken, ancient and familiar. The vows are exchanged. The ring is placed upon your finger, sealing the union before the assembled witnesses and, in theory, before the divine. It is a sacred moment, or meant to be, the actual joining of two lives that all this elaborate machinery was built to produce. And it happens with a dignity and gravity that, for a few minutes, quiets even the most calculating observers. Ever spent an enormous amount of time and effort preparing for something, only to have the moment itself arrive and pass so quickly that you could scarcely believe it was over? Now imagine that months of planning, mountains of money, and the labour of countless people all culminated in a ceremony lasting mere minutes, at the end of which your entire future was decided. That is the wedding ceremony. The preparation was vast and endless. The event itself is brief, almost startlingly so, gone before you've quite grasped that it is happening. And what do you feel standing there newly bound to your husband? Perhaps very little, numbed by exhaustion and nerves. Perhaps a wave of relief that the dreaded moment has finally come and gone. Perhaps a quiet dread at the realization that you are now, irrevocably, the wife of a man you hardly know. The emotions of the bride are her own private matter, hidden beneath a serene expression. For whatever she feels, she must appear radiant and composed before the watching crowd. There is a strange hollowness possible in this moment, a sense that the thing everyone worked toward has arrived, and yet feels curiously weightless. You are married. The word applies to you now, and yet the man beside you may still be a near stranger, the future still a mystery, the feelings that ought to accompany such a moment perhaps absent or confused. The ceremony joins your lives officially, but it cannot manufacture the intimacy that was never allowed to grow. So the vows conclude, the ring rests on your finger, and you turn to face the congregation as a married woman. The sacred part is done, brief and solemn and over, and now, with barely a pause to absorb it, you must proceed to the next act, because the guests have been sitting a long while, and the feast is waiting. Now it is time to eat, at what is charmingly called a wedding breakfast, even though it happens around midday and involves enough food to feed a regiment. Course after course arrives, prepared by the finest kitchens money can hire, featuring dishes so elaborate that half of them exist purely to be impressive rather than eaten. There are oysters, terrines, roasts, aspics, and sauces with French names longer than your marriage vows. You, however, will barely touch any of it, because the corset has other plans. You will smile, sip, and watch several hundred people enjoy a feast you paid for and cannot digest. Let us clear up the peculiar name first, because it invites confusion. The wedding breakfast is not eaten at breakfast time at all, but rather following the ceremony, often around midday. The term is a matter of tradition rather than logic, and no one questions it. What matters is that this is the great feast, the lavish meal that follows the vows, and it is designed to impress every guest who partakes of it. Modesty has no place at the table. The food arrives in a seemingly endless parade of courses, each more elaborate than the last. The finest kitchens produce dish after dish, and the sheer quantity is staggering, far more than anyone could reasonably eat. There are delicacies of every kind, rich and rare and expensive, prepared with enormous skill and presented with theatrical flourish. The meal goes on, course succeeding course, a display of abundance meant to overwhelm and delight in equal measure. Consider how much of this food exists purely for show. Elaborate constructions of aspic, dishes moulded and decorated with painstaking artistry, creations whose visual splendor matters more than their taste. Much of the meal is designed to be admired as much as consumed, to demonstrate the wealth and sophistication of the hosts through sheer culinary extravagance. Half the point of the feast is not nourishment at all, but the statement it makes about the family providing it. Ever attended a grand meal where the food was magnificent and endless, yet you found yourself unable to enjoy it, too nervous or too constrained to eat more than a bite? Now imagine you are the bride, laced into a corset that leaves no room for food, seated before the most lavish feast of your life, and obliged to smile graciously while barely able to swallow a mouthful. That is the wedding breakfast for the woman at its centre. The feast is glorious, and you, of all people, cannot partake of it. The irony is sharp and unmistakable. This tremendous meal is provided in your honour and paid for by your family, yet you, its guest of honour, must sit through it in a garment engineered to make eating nearly impossible. So you sip a little, taste almost nothing, and watch the crowd enjoy the bounty you have provided. The feast belongs to everyone but you, and you preside over it, hungry, composed, and quietly aware of the absurdity. The meal serves purposes far beyond feeding the guests. It is a demonstration of your family's resources, a proof of their ability to provide magnificence without limit. Every course, every rare delicacy, every French-named creation adds to the impression of boundless wealth and impeccable taste. The guests, in enjoying the feast, are absorbing its message, and they will carry that message away with them, describing the splendour to those who are not fortunate enough to attend. And so the courses keep coming, and the guests keep eating, and you keep smiling from your place of honour, presiding over a banquet you cannot touch. It is your feast in name and in cost, and in nothing else. So sip your wine, admire the endless dishes, and hold your serene expression steady. Several hundred people are enjoying the meal of the season courtesy of you, and you, my friend, will be genuinely hungry by evening. Let us admire the cake, a towering monument to sugar and excess that guests will discuss for weeks. It stands tall and white and architectural, tiered and pillared and decorated within an inch of its life, sometimes so large it requires its own table and a small team to assemble. Cutting it is a ceremony in itself, watched by every eye in the room. Slices may be boxed and sent home as keepsakes, and tradition holds that unmarried guests should sleep with a sliver under their pillow to dream of future love, which is both romantic and a wonderful way to attract ants. Let us take in the sheer architecture of the thing, because a Gilded Age wedding cake is less a dessert than a structure. It rises in tiers, one atop another, sometimes separated by pillars, climbing to a height that dominates the room. It is a feat of confectionery engineering, built to impress through scale alone, so large and elaborate that assembling it requires skill, planning, and more than one pair of hands. This is not a cake you slice casually. It is a monument you unveil. The decoration is where the true extravagance lies. The surface is covered in intricate work, delicate piping, sugar flowers, ornaments of every kind, all rendered in painstaking detail by skilled hands over many hours. The whole confection gleams white and pristine, a vision of purity and abundance. Every inch is worked, ornamented, perfected, until the cake becomes a genuine work of art, admired by the guests and destined to be described in every account of the wedding. Consider the ceremony of cutting it, because this too is a performance. The cutting of the cake is a moment watched by the entire room, a ritual charged with meaning and observed by every guest. It marks a milestone in the celebration, a shared act between the newly married couple, and it is done with appropriate gravity and grace. All eyes turn to the bride and groom as the blade descends, and the moment is savoured as one of the day's small sacred rites. Ever seen a dessert so beautiful and elaborate that no one quite wanted to be the one to ruin it by cutting in, its perfection almost too impressive to disturb? Now imagine a cake so towering and ornate that it took a team to build and stands as tall as a child, its surface a masterpiece of sugarcraft, and that hundreds of guests are watching the moment it is finally breached. That is the wedding cake. It is almost too magnificent to eat, and its destruction is itself an event. The traditions surrounding the cake add their own charm. Slices are often boxed and sent home with guests as keepsakes, small tokens of the grand occasion to be treasured or displayed. And there is the old belief that an unmarried guest who sleeps with a piece of wedding cake beneath the pillow will dream of their future love. It is a sweet and romantic notion, passed down through generations, though one suspects it did rather more for the local insect population than for anyone's romantic prospects. The cake, like so much else at this wedding, is ultimately a statement. Its size, its splendour, its artistry, all proclaim the wealth and importance of the family that provided it. Guests will remember it, describe it, and measure it against the cakes of other weddings. It is dessert, yes, but it is also a monument to excess, a sugar sculpture built to be admired and remembered long after the last crumb is gone. So gaze upon the towering cake, that gleaming white monument to abundance, and prepare for the ceremonial cutting that the whole room awaits. It is beautiful beyond reason. It is enormous beyond need, and a slice of it, tradition promises, will grant sweet dreams and possibly a few ants along the way. Now let us talk about the newspapers. Because your wedding is not a private affair, it is national news. Reporters will describe your gown in exhaustive detail, list the notable guests, tally the value of the gifts, and speculate breathlessly about the fortune involved. Sketches and columns will appear in cities you have never visited. Ordinary people who will never meet you will know what you wore, what you ate, and how much it all cost. You are in effect an early celebrity, famous for being wealthy and married. The public devours every detail, and privacy from this day forward is a thing you used to have. Let us understand the appetite of the public, because it was genuinely enormous. The lives of the very rich fascinated ordinary readers, who devoured every detail of high society's doings, the way later generations would follow celebrities and film stars. A grand wedding was a feast for this hunger, and the newspapers served it eagerly, filling columns with descriptions of the great occasion for readers who could only dream of such splendour. You were the entertainment, and the public could not get enough. The coverage was astonishingly detailed. Reporters described the gown thread by thread, the flowers bloom by bloom, the guests name by name. They listed the gifts and their values, tallied the sums involved, and painted vivid pictures of the whole affair for readers hundreds of miles away. Nothing was too small to report. The public wanted every detail, and the papers competing for readers supplied them in exhaustive, breathless abundance. Consider how far your fame spread. Sketches of your gown and accounts of your wedding might appear in cities you had never visited, read by people who would never meet you and knew nothing of you beyond your wealth and your marriage. You became a figure in the public imagination, a name attached to a spectacle, discussed in homes and shops and streets across the country. Your private milestone had become public property, consumed by strangers as casually as any other news. Ever had a personal moment become far more public than you ever intended, discussed and dissected by people who had no real connection to you, your privacy evaporating before your eyes? Now imagine that moment is your wedding, that the entire nation's press has descended upon it, and that your gown, your guests, your feast, and your fortune are laid out in newspapers for anyone to read. That is the press frenzy. You are famous now, whether you wished it or not, and the fame follows the money, not the person. There is a peculiar quality to this early celebrity. You are known not for any deed or talent, but simply for being wealthy and married well. The public follows you because your life represents a fantasy of luxury they will never touch, and your wedding is the grandest expression of that fantasy. You're famous for your circumstances, a symbol of a world of privilege, your name meaningful to strangers only as a marker of unimaginable wealth. The consequences for your privacy are permanent. From this day forward, you are a figure of public interest. Your comings and goings potential news, your life subject to observation and comment. The wedding announces you to the world, and the world, having noticed you, does not look away. Whatever privacy you enjoyed as an unmarried girl is gone, traded for a place in the public imagination that you can never quite reclaim. And so the papers print their columns, the sketches circulate, and the nation reads about your gown and your guests and your fortune over breakfast. You have become a spectacle, a story, a name that means wealth to people who will never know your face. It is a strange kind of immortality, and you did nothing to earn it but be born rich and marry richer. So brace yourself for the coverage, exhaustive and breathless and utterly beyond your control. You are national news now, and privacy, my friend, is something you used to have. It is time to leave, and your honeymoon is not a quiet week at the shore. It is a months-long grand tour of Europe, sailing across the Atlantic in luxury to visit the great cities, cathedrals and drawing rooms of the old world. You will be presented to relatives, paraded before foreign society, and shown off as proof that the marriage was a triumph. It is a working holiday disguised as romance, and you will spend much of it alone with a husband you are only now beginning to know, discovering in real time whether you have anything to say to each other at all. Let us set sail, because the journey begins with a voyage across the Atlantic in considerable style. The great ocean liners offered luxury to those who could afford it, and you travel in the finest accommodations, cushioned from the discomforts of the sea. The crossing takes days, a slow transition from your old world to the old world proper, and it marks the beginning of a honeymoon that will last not days but months, an extended immersion in the grandeur of Europe. Once ashore, the tour unfolds across the great cities and sights of the continent. You visit magnificent cathedrals, celebrated landmarks, famous galleries, and the fashionable drawing rooms of European society. It is an education and a spectacle rolled into one, a chance to see the wonders of the old world and, just as importantly, to be seen seeing them. The itinerary is grand, the pace often demanding, and the whole affair is conducted with the lavishness your station requires. Consider the true purpose beneath the romance, because this honeymoon is as much a mission as a holiday. You will be presented to your husband's relatives and introduced to foreign society, displayed as the successful outcome of the marriage. For a match between American wealth and European rank, the tour serves to integrate you into your new world, to show you off to those who matter there, and to confirm that the union was indeed a triumph. You are, once again, on display, this time before an entirely new audience. Ever gone on a trip meant to be a joyful escape, only to find it filled with obligations, introductions and performances, the leisure crowded out by duty? Now imagine your honeymoon. That supposedly romantic journey is actually a months-long campaign of being presented, paraded, and assessed by your husband's relations and foreign society, all while you are still a near stranger to the man beside you. That is the grand tour honeymoon. It wears the costume of romance, but underneath it is work, and often lonely work at that. And here, for the first time, you are truly alone with your husband, without the chaperones and the crowds, and the elaborate supervision that governed your courtship. All those months of guarded, formal interaction left you barely acquainted, and now you must discover in real time and at close quarters whether you have anything in common at all. It is a strange and vulnerable position, learning the fundamental nature of your spouse only after the vows have made the discovery irreversible. The results of this discovery vary enormously. Some couples find, to their relief, that affection, or at least companionship, can grow between them. Others find that they are and will remain strangers sharing a name and a life but little else. The honeymoon becomes the crucible in which the true character of the marriage is revealed, and there is no undoing whatever it uncovers. You learn who your husband is precisely when it is too late to change your mind. So you tour the great cities, admire the cathedrals, meet the relatives, and perform for foreign society, all while quietly taking the measure of the man you have married. The scenery is magnificent, the obligations are constant, and somewhere between the galleries and the drawing rooms, you begin to learn whether this marriage will be a partnership or a very long, very elegant arrangement between strangers. Let us arrive at your new life, which comes with a house, or rather houses, each grander and colder than the last. There is the mansion in the city, all marble and echoing halls, and very likely a summer cottage by the sea that is a cottage in name only, being roughly the size of a museum. These homes are built to impress, not to comfort. Rooms sit unused, decorated for guests who visit twice a year. You will wander vast corridors that feel more like a hotel than a home, and slowly realize that being surrounded by opulence is not at all the same as being surrounded by warmth. Let us tour the city mansion first, because it is the seat of your new domestic life and a monument to your family's arrival. It is vast, built of marble and stone, filled with grand staircases, soaring ceilings, and rooms upon rooms decorated to the highest fashion. Everything about it is designed to impress, to announce wealth and status to anyone who enters. It is magnificent, undeniably, and it is also enormous in a way that can feel less like a home and more like a very grand and rather chilly institution. Then there is the so-called cottage by the sea, a summer residence that mocks the humble word attached to it. These seaside retreats were cottages only in the ironic language of the very rich, being in truth enormous mansions in their own right, palatial homes for the warm months, staffed and furnished on a lavish scale. To call such a place a cottage was a kind of joke, a wink among the wealthy at just how far their idea of modest differed from everyone else's. Consider the purpose of these houses, because comfort ranks surprisingly low among their functions. They exist above all to impress, to serve as stages for entertaining and displaying the family's wealth. Grand rooms are designed for grand occasions, decorated for the eyes of guests rather than the ease of the people who live there. The house is a statement first and a dwelling second, and its splendour is aimed outward at the world that must be shown how successful your family has become. Ever stayed somewhere so large and so formal that it felt impossible to relax, every room too grand to truly settle into, the sheer scale of the place keeping you at a distance. Now imagine that place is your home, that you live amid echoing marble halls and rooms so numerous that many go unused, and that the whole vast structure was built to be admired rather than lived in. That is the great house. It surrounds you with magnificence and quite often with a peculiar and unexpected loneliness. The emptiness of it can be striking. Many rooms sit unused for most of the year, opened and aired only for the occasional grand event, decorated and furnished for guests who appear a handful of times. You move through spaces that dwarf you, corridors that stretch on and on, a house so large that you might go hours without encountering another soul except the servants. The scale that impresses visitors can, for the woman who lives there, feel less like luxury and more like solitude dressed in marble. And here lies the quiet truth beneath all the opulence. Grandeur is not the same as warmth. You are surrounded by beauty, by every material comfort imaginable, by rooms of astonishing splendour. And yet a house built to impress the world may offer little of the coziness and intimacy that make a place truly a home. You may find yourself richer than you ever imagined, and lonelier than you ever expected, wandering vast halls that echo with everything except affection. So settle into your new houses, the marble mansion and the museum-sized cottage, each grander and colder than the last. They will dazzle every guest who enters, and they will teach you, slowly, that being surrounded by opulence and being surrounded by warmth are two very different things indeed. Now, let us meet your staff, because a house this size does not run itself, and you are now the manager of a small and highly ranked workforce. Butlers, footmen, maids, cooks, coachmen, and a lady's maid all move through the house in careful choreography, and every one of them answers eventually to you. Learning to command them is a skill nobody taught you. Too soft and they lose respect. Too harsh, and the house turns against you in 1,000 quiet ways. You are 20 years old, freshly married, and suddenly responsible for the daily lives of dozens of people who know far more about running this house than you do. Let us survey the staff, because they form a complex and carefully ordered world of their own. A great house employed a whole hierarchy of servants, each with defined duties and rank. There were senior figures like the butler and the housekeeper who commanded the others, and beneath them footmen, maids, cooks, kitchen staff, coachmen, and more down through the ranks. Your own lady's maid attended to you personally. Together they numbered many, and they kept the vast household running through constant coordinated labour. The organisation of this workforce was intricate, governed by its own rules and pecking order. Senior servants directed junior ones, tasks were divided with precision, and the whole operation ran on routine and discipline. The servants had their own society below stairs, their own hierarchy and customs, a world that functioned largely out of sight of the family, yet was essential to everything the family enjoyed. This complex machine kept the great house alive, and now, as mistress, you sat at the top of it. Consider the challenge this posed to a young and inexperienced bride. Managing such a household was a genuine skill, one requiring knowledge, judgment, and authority, and it was rarely something a sheltered young woman had been truly prepared for. You were expected to oversee the running of the entire establishment, to command respect from experienced servants, and to ensure the smooth functioning of a home far larger and more complex than anything you had managed before. It was in effect the management of a substantial enterprise handed to you overnight. Ever been placed suddenly in charge of people who knew their work far better than you did, expected to lead them while privately unsure what you were doing, terrified of losing their respect? Now imagine you are 20, newly married, and responsible for a large staff of seasoned servants who understand every detail of a household you have only just entered. That is the position of the young mistress. You must command with confidence a domain in which you are at first the least knowledgeable person present. The balance required was delicate. Treat the servants too gently and you risked losing their respect, appearing weak and unable to command. Treat them too harshly and you bred resentment, and a resentful staff could undermine you in countless small and untraceable ways, letting standards slip, dragging their feet, quietly making your life difficult. Finding the right authority, firm but fair, respected but not feared, was an art, and it was one you had to learn on the job, often through uncomfortable trial and error. The servants, for their part, watched their new mistress carefully, taking her measure. Experienced staff had seen mistresses come and go and knew well how to read one. They could tell whether she was capable or floundering, and they responded accordingly. Earning their genuine respect took time and skill, and until you did, you governed a household that was quietly assessing your every decision, waiting to see whether you were equal to the role you'd inherited. So take command of your small army of servants, this intricate and experienced workforce that keeps your grand house alive. Learn to lead them with the right blend of firmness and grace, though no one ever taught you how. You're 20, newly wed, and suddenly the head of a household of dozens who know it far better than you. Welcome to the management of a very large, very watchful home. So there you have it, a single journey through a Gilded Age wedding, from the moment you woke rich and doomed to the moment you became the very society woman you once feared. You were laced into a corset that rearranged your organs, paraded through a season like a show pony, married off to a stranger by lawyers and cigars, and draped in enough diamonds to buy a small town. You endured the etiquette, the gatekeepers, the guest lists, and the newspapers that told the whole country what you wore before you'd even taken it off. And at the end of it all, you were handed a marble house the size of a museum, and quietly asked to produce a son. It sounds like a fairy tale, and in the retelling it glitters like one. But strip away the satin and the seed pearls, and what remains is a young woman navigating an impossible world with remarkable grace. She had almost no say in her own life, yet she carried the weight of her family's ambitions without ever letting the strain show. That took a kind of strength that never made the papers. Behind every dazzling gown was a person holding her breath, doing her duty, and hoping somewhere underneath it all for a little warmth she was rarely allowed to ask for. It is easy to envy them, those glittering brides of a golden age. But envy fades when you remember how little of their lives truly belong to them. So tonight, as you settle into a bed you chose, in a home that is truly yours, beside people you actually picked, take a quiet moment to be grateful. You can marry for love. You can breathe all the way in. You can eat at your own feast. Because history may be lavish and beautiful and cruel all at once, but it is also proof that people can endure gilded cages with quiet courage and dream of something softer waiting on the other side. Sleep well. You've earned it.